Okay, here's a little bit more about water. I'm not going to overthink this. I'm just going to show you a couple slides from both the McGraw-Hill book and from the Pearson book. A couple things I really want to point out to you. So here we go. One category of pollutants in water are these inorganic pollutants, so they don't have carbon in them. Inorganic, not organic. So one category is metals, mercury, lead, cadmium, tin, nickel. Those can be really bad for us when they end up in water and then end up moving up the food chain as smaller organisms eat them, and then maybe a bigger fish, and then a bigger fish, and maybe a bird comes and eats that, and wherever we are in that food chain, that can be dangerous for us. You've heard about mercury in fish. This here, and I will put this up on Blackboard for you, but it's the Minamata story, and it's about mercury poisoning. It's actually very disturbing to watch, but if you want to go that way. So there are different fish that you can look into that don't have quite as much mercury because they're not as far up on the food chain, and so I can link you to some of that stuff too. In this picture we see some leaching, right? There's a mine in the area, and leaching means that it comes out of, well, this is the leachate that comes out of the mining area, so it leaches from that. And here is some metals and acids. The stream should not be, this creek should not be this color, so that's one big indication of pollutant. Here we have arsenic, so non-metallic salts. That can be found in some areas leaching as well, and causing birth defects, as you can see here. Such happy stuff I get to teach you about. Acids, so a lot of the industry that we have produces a lot of these types of pollutions I'm talking about. Some countries don't have much in the way of regulations and rules. We do, and that's so we don't have big pollutant problems. But as you know, depending on the administration that's in the White House and the Congress and all the decision makers like that, once we vote them in and they're making decisions, they can pull it kind of one way or the other. And oftentimes they think, hey, big business, they can take care of it. They'll, they won't want to pollute because people won't buy their products if they're, not sustainable and behaving. Well, that's not the case. Oftentimes they want to cut corners, and it's expensive to clean up their pollution before it leaves their facility. So they would rather put that cost on the taxpayers as far as paying to get these very poisonous sites cleaned up. They're called Superfund sites, not Superfund, Superfund sites that that taxpayer money sometimes goes into to clean that up. So really, when we think about not having regulations on companies, you're really deciding just to pay for the pollution cleanup by our tax money rather than the company doing it. So think about it. Yeah, coal mining depends on how much sulfur is in the coal, but that can be something that creates acid rain. So you've heard of that before. That's sulfuric acid. So not only will it damage buildings and statues, but it actually will damage the aquatic life or soil life when that pH gets changed, because acids and bases, if you're putting more acid into the soil and water and air, it's going to change the pH, and certain organisms can't live beyond a very small window of pH. So organic chemicals, so those will be your chemicals that have carbon hydrogen chains, things like that, like plastics, pesticides, pharmaceuticals, so that means medicines and things. So one thing you can do is make sure that when you get rid of a particular chemical that may be toxic, find a place to take that to. And we have one not too far from us here in the Chicagoland area, and that's the Naperville Hazardous Waste Site, and I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. But one thing I want to make sure that you keep in mind is never, ever, ever flush medicine down the toilet. We already pee out like 90% of what we take anyway. So you're taking your antibiotics, or your, maybe you're on a steroid or antidepressant, schizophrenia medicine. Gosh, what else? There's lots of different medicines. So whatever you're on, we are actually peeing most of that out. It doesn't get metabolized in our body. So we don't want to add more problem to the water by flushing medicine down the toilet. Never ever do that. There are oftentimes police stations that will take old drugs. So they're, go on those websites and it'll tell you, put them in a Ziploc baggie, and, you can throw away the containers. But don't flush that stuff. It does not get cleaned out. The wastewater treatment plant doesn't clean out medication. So all that stuff's going into our water supply. So here we have household hazardous waste site. This one happens to be in Naperville, Illinois. And let's do something real quick here. These are the items that are accepted, and it'll tell you the items that are not accepted. So sediment can be another pollutant, and that's when loose soil and sand wash from the shore into a stream or river, ocean, whatever, and when there's too much of it. So basically, if you're cutting down forests, if you're taking away prairie or wetland, if you're taking away what holds the soil in place or the sand in place, that's going to wash away when it starts to rain, and that washes into these systems. And what happens is if you have a small creek like this, it's going to start filling in that creek, and then the creek or the river or whatever it is going to get more shallow, and it's going to go faster. It also could get darker depending on the type of sediment that's getting into the water. If you have site predators like bass, they're not going to do well because there's all that sediment pollution in there, and they can't see their prey anymore. So one thing that's done is you can put this silt screen, right? Or roll out this type of thing. Sometimes you'll see hay or straw in little ditches near construction sites, but this is a silt screen, a silt fence, and it is supposed to keep that sediment from going off of a construction site. And it's there are rules out there that mandate that you have to use these around construction sites. So now you know, when you see those, you can impress your friends and be like, yo, that's a silt screen. I know this stuff. So yes, there are ways that we are trying to prevent sediment pollution. Thermal pollution, that's when you change the temperature of water by human activity, and that can actually decrease that oxygen in the water if the water is getting warmer, and alter what can live there. And we do that when we create energy, right? If it's a coal-fired power plant or a nuclear power plant, they actually release the water that they use, they release it back into the water system, and they're supposed to return it closer to the temperature of the system where they pulled the water out of, but they often don't follow those laws and rules. So they return the water much warmer, and it creates a big problem. So there is this coal-fired power plant in Tampa, Florida, right here. And so they actually do create thermal pollution. So that's the bad news. The good news is the manatees love it. Now remember, manatees are mammals, so they don't have to breathe oxygen under the water. They come up for their oxygen. So in the cold months, it's a great place to go and view manatees. It's pretty fun. I've been there. So yeah, and you can actually, when you go to the website, you can from anywhere take control of their cameras online. You get like a minute to be in control of the cameras, and you can zoom in and try to see the manatees from your computer. So it's kind of cool. So yes, we have some regulations and laws, and the Clean Water Act came about in 1972. And there have been various changes to that, additions. Like I said, depends on the administration if we're putting more meat into it or if we're taking it away. And here in 1998, we have some changes as well. You can look into that. There's some hopeful stuff. In the 1960s, Lake Erie was considered a dead lake. So, and now it's actually the walleye capital of the world. Woohoo! And I think the other day we talked about another water system that has been a successful, the Cuyahoga River we talked about. That is a success story now. Other countries have other rules and regulations, or they don't have many at all. We might think of some of this stuff as problems that are over there or somewhere else, but pollution knows no boundaries. So air, water, they move. So groundwater can also be polluted. Whatever seeps into the ground, right? Sometimes it gets filtered by the rocks and the soil and the sand, which is helpful, but some pollutant does make it down to the water. A lot of people get their drinking water from groundwater. So when pollution does make it into the ocean, because of the movement of the water, it tends to culminate or join up in these certain areas, and they're called garbage patches. So these areas will have like several miles and wide, and then like 30 feet deep of just plastics floating around, or just other pollutants floating around, big, small. So, wildlife gets tangled in it, or they eat it, or birds come in, they take it out and they feed it to their young on shore. And then there's a Colbert Report. It's kind of funny, but Charles Moore is the person who discovered these garbage patches. So if you've watched the Colbert show before, you know he does some serious stuff with a little bit of humor in there too. When winter comes along in some of these cold states, like here in Chicago, and they put salt on the roads. Now, that salt can wash into the water, right? Goes down those storm drains, or goes into the soil, which percolates down into the water as well. So either way, it's putting too much salt on the plants around there, or seeping into the soil, getting into groundwater, going into the creeks from the storm drains, and that can be really a big pollutant. So one thing that they're doing to try to eliminate some of the salt is they actually take this up here, this beet juice, and that with a combination of salt is a way to reduce the amount of salt they use. So you can look into that. It's kind of a cool way that they're reducing that salt usage. Go up to a storm drain. Sometimes it's etched in there or spray painted like this, saying basically don't pour anything down here. It goes right to the waterway, whether it's the ocean, whether it's the creek nearby. So sometimes there's warnings. So they're hoping it'll educate people when they walk up to the storm drain to not pour something down there. So this is a little bit about water usage. Here's the area where Lake Chad and all the waterways around it has been depleted over time because of agricultural use. So we have from 1973 to 2013, so just in that span of time, you can see less and less and less and less water available. So of course that changes people's way of life in that area as well. So if you recall, we have about 70% of Earth covered with water. Unfortunately, it's not all easily accessible or usable for our human needs. I'm going to read this verbatim, and then I'll make the picture bigger so you can see it. Where is Earth's water? Most of Earth's water is salty or trapped in ice. Only 1/100th of 1% is fresh water available for human consumption. To understand what these percentages mean, if lake water is 20% of 1.3% of Earth's fresh water, what percentage of Earth's water is found in lakes? Only 0.0065%. So let me make this picture bigger. There we go. I really like this graphic actually. So it shows you how much water we actually have that we can use. We're actually really lucky in the Chicagoland area to have Lake Michigan water. In fact, any of the states or countries that border the Great Lakes, they have different agreements with one another about the usage of that water. Another thing to remember is that rivers and areas that have water have natural floodplains. We sometimes forget this. We build very near a riverbank. We cultivate the land for farming because it's very rich soil since it floods. Often it's a natural course of things for that area to flood. So of course it's going to be rich farmland, but then we get upset when the this is the Mississippi River. When the Mississippi River floods, farms get flooded, things get washed away, homes get washed away. We tend to forget that nature just is going to do its thing, and we build in places that get flooded. There's another reason that an area can flood, and it's not just the natural floodplains like I just discussed, but it can be because we have changed the topography of the land. So I like this graphic. We have forest, meadow, agriculture, residential, urban. And as you can see, the various areas block water from seeping back down into the ground. If you have the forest, you have a lot of roots and a lot of plants that want to take up that water. So you have a lot of infiltration, a lot of water going into the soil and not much running off of that land, okay, leaving that area. Meadow, you have another 80-20. A lot of that is, draws in the water. And agriculture, now it's getting a little bit more of a problem. You have 67% infiltration and then 33% of the water going off of the land. And remember, with agriculture, not only is that water leaving the land, but it's carrying pesticides and fertilizers, and it's carrying possibly feces from the animals, or a myriad of things, pollutants that come with farmland. And then you have residential. Wow, even less infiltration, because we are blocking the land with buildings and driveways and roads. And so there's 53% runoff. So a lot of that water doesn't stay where it's at, doesn't infiltrate the land right there. So you may have been in a neighborhood that floods. Well, that's because we block all the land. So it's better when you have brick driveways, right? So the little separations between the brick, like the old-fashioned streets, where the water can go down, or there's some permeable, they're called permeable pavers, permeable parking lots, or you could have, I think there's a permeable concrete too you can look into, or just don't have such a big house, right? Do a smaller footprint. Or I'll show you a picture in a little bit. You could put a green roof on top of your building, and that way you have plants up there taking in some of that water. I'll show you in just a second, like I said. Here you have an urban area, so much of the land is blocked, very little greenery left. So 83% runoff, only 17% of that water is going back into the soil where it belongs. And remember, the water doesn't just go into the soil. And you have places, rivers and lakes and streams nearby that not only they don't just fill from rain, right, or atmospheric deposition from above. These waterways fill from under the ground too. So if you're not putting the water back into the ground near a lake, you are depleting that lake even more than just drawing the water out of it. You're not replenishing in that. We have inserted ourselves in the water cycle. Okay, that's a big problem. Here's a picture of some gentlemen sitting in some flood water. So I want to remind you, though, never go into flood water. Imagine all the toxins that could be in that flood water, and the oils, and anything that's been flooded is going to take those chemicals from your home or your cars, all of the animal feces in the whole neighborhood and beyond, all of that's in the water. So as much fun as it seems to play in floodwater, don't do it. So I'm going to leave you with a positive. There are many ways to reduce water runoff. There are many ways to reduce toxins in our water, and I already told you one of those is don't flush your medications. Of course, you have to go to the bathroom and flush the toilet, right? But don't pour the medication into the toilet. That's one great thing you can do. You can follow the directions. If you have to use fertilizer or pesticide, follow the directions. Even for your own safety, follow those directions. Try to reduce the phosphorus in your fertilizers. Try to use natural fertilizers. Maybe don't fertilize. Maybe grow something different. Grow clover in your lawn rather than, grow native things. Buffalo grass is, I believe, a native grass. Native plants do better. They don't need you to water it so much, and they don't need so many chemicals because they're used to living here. So if you can plant native grasses instead of, flowers or plants that need a lot of water, these things are meant to live here, so they do very well in this environment, whatever environment you're watching this video from. But here's a green roof on this building, and let me see what building that is actually. Yeah, I thought so. I've been on this green roof. It's the Chicago City Hall. I believe they have even a beehive up there as well. So green roofs do great. They insulate the building so you don't have to use as much air conditioning in the summer, not as much heat in the winter. If you have a smaller building, it's going to make more of an impact than this big, high rise. But it can provide habitat for different organisms. It can provide a lovely place for you to go and enjoy. I'm not sure, we had a tour, so we were up there, but some green roofs are closed off to the public or to the workers. But some buildings have green roofs that you can actually go out and enjoy. So, and it also slows down rainwater because it's going to soak up some of that rainwater before it makes it down to the street level. So many good things we can do. That I do at home is, I don't buy bottled water as when I can avoid it. So you can get a really good filter pitcher. I do that. And then if somebody's drinking a glass of water, or maybe somebody brings over a water bottle and they don't finish it, I have a vase on my counter that I pour the unused water in, the water that somebody didn't drink, and then I use that for a plant, or I use it for a dirty pan. I shut off the water as much as possible when I brush my teeth or when I'm shampooing my hair. When I'm doing dishes, I use the dishwasher. I pack that thing, because I don't like to waste water or energy. But if I only have a few, or if I need to soak them, I'm always just thinking about how to reduce the amount of water I use every day, and how to keep as many toxins and chemicals that might be dangerous for all of us out of the water. So there are so many good things we can do, and my kitty says do them.